I'm Connor Grohl, and this is Slept on Sports, the podcast that takes interesting, lesser-known sports stories, stories you could say have been slept on, and brings them back into the light. The last time I did a college football story was way back in episode 3. I was with my good friends Mike Tyrell and Jake Bermonde, and I was talking about a 2006 game between North Texas and Florida International, one of the weirdest, worst games in college football history, one that, despite going to 7 overtimes, finished with a final score of just 25-22. This time around, we'll take a look at a game that North Texas played the following season, in 2007. Despite not going to overtime at all, the game finished with Navy defeating the Mean Green 74-62. And again, this is a football score, not a basketball score. But we won't just be focusing on that game either. On this episode, we'll be diving into a collection of games that took place around that same time. As a brief review, there are 4 levels of NCAA football. Division I is split into the higher tier FBS, the teams that play for what we think of as the national championship, and the FCS for smaller Division I schools. There's also Division II and Division III play. And during a 6-week span in 2007, the FBS record for most total points scored in a game, most total points scored in a regulation game, and the FCS, D2, and D3 records for most total points scored in a game were all broken. Now, these records had a long time to be established. Division I record-keeping began in 1937, and for D2 and D3, record-keeping began in 1946. This means that teams in 2007, across all of NCAA football, were laughing in the face of 6 or 7 decades of history. And this all begs the question, why? But perhaps even more interestingly, there is no real reason why this should have happened. There were certainly some rule changes going into the 2007 season, but nothing major. Scoring was up over the previous season, but it wasn't an outlier to the way scoring was trending, and teams score more points today on average than they did in 2007. We will likely never see anything like this again. These are the games that collectively rewrote the record books for offensive explosions in college football. We begin on October 14th, 2007, when Boise State defeated Nevada 69-67 in 4 overtimes, a game which combined for 136 points, establishing a new record for the most total points scored in an FBS game and tying the record for the most total points scored in any NCAA game, a mark which was set in 1968 when North Park defeated North Central 104-32 in a Division III contest. Boise State entered the game 4-1, and coming off an undefeated season in 2006, one where they defeated Oklahoma in a historic Fiesta Bowl and finished number 5 in the AP poll. Nevada, on the other hand, entered the game 2-3, and had a quarterback making his first career start, a true freshman by the name of Colin Kaepernick. Boise State led 28-21 at half, but needed to kick a 27-yard field goal as time expired to send it to overtime at 44-44. Both teams traded touchdowns in the first 2 overtimes, a field goal in the 3rd overtime, but it was decided in the 4th overtime when Boise State scored a touchdown and hit their 2-point conversion, while Nevada failed to convert on their 2-point try. Despite the loss, Kaepernick finished with 243 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air and 177 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Certainly an incredible and memorable first start. No FBS game would finish with more than 136 total points until 2016, when Pitt defeated Syracuse 76-61 behind their quarterback, Nathan Peterman. Yes, seriously. But there are many more games to get to. Just 13 days later, on October 27th, a new record for most points scored in any NCAA game, regardless of division, was established. In an FCS matchup between two 2-5 teams, Weber State defeated Portland State 73-68 for a total of 141 points, all in regulation. This game, which still holds the FCS record for most total points scored, finished just 7-3 Portland State at the end of the first quarter. But Weber State scored 35 in an explosive second quarter, and by halftime the score was 38-27. Each team added on an additional 3 touchdowns in the third quarter, and entering the fourth, Weber State led 59-48. With 4 minutes and 22 seconds left, Weber State scored to go up 73-55, but Portland State wasn't done quite yet. They scored a touchdown on their next possession, and on the ensuing Weber State possession, Portland State recovered a fumble and returned it 84 yards for a touchdown with 31 seconds left, making the score 73-68. However, they would fail to recover the ensuing onside kick, and Weber State was able to run out the clock. I know Weber State won the game, but once again, I need to talk about the losing team. Portland State's quarterback, another true freshman named Drew Hubel, threw for 485 yards and 9 touchdowns, a mark which ties an FCS record for most passing touchdowns by an individual in a game. 2 wide receivers, Tremaine Kirkland and David Lewis, each caught 4 touchdowns. As a whole, the team only rushed the ball 10 times for a grand total of 17 yards. And they did all this having the ball for just 21 minutes and 43 seconds of the 60-minute game. Weber State was much more balanced. They had 353 rushing yards and 334 passing yards, scoring 4 times through the air, 5 on the ground, and then 1 punt return touchdown. But this game was just incredibly wild. And obviously, it established a new record, regardless of division, for most total points in a game. That record, though, lasted an entire 2 weeks, because on November 10th, Hartwick beat Utica 72-70 in a 4-overtime Division III game with 142 points scored, 1 more than Weber State versus Portland State. This one was an incredibly back-and-forth contest. Utica led 14-7 after the first quarter, but after that it was tied the whole way, 21-21 at half, 42-42 after 3, and 44-49 after the fourth quarter, and then obviously tied again after the first overtime, the second overtime, and the third overtime, where once again, a 2-point conversion ultimately is the difference maker. Hartwick 72, Utica 70. That game kicked off at 1:30 Eastern Time, and while it was still going on at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, another game kicked off that would break a scoring record. We're finally back where we started, with the game that finished Navy 74, North Texas 62. At 136 total points, it tied the mark for the most points scored in an FBS game with the Boise State-Nevada contest that had taken place nearly 4 weeks earlier. Only this time, the 136 points were all scored in regulation, no overtime required. Navy entered this duel 5-4, coming off a special triple overtime victory at Notre Dame that snapped a 43-game losing streak to the Fighting Irish that still holds a record for the longest losing streak by one FBS opponent against another. North Texas, on the other hand, was just 1-7. Perhaps the most surprising thing about this game is that it includes Navy. Navy runs the triple option offense, which is incredibly run-heavy. In fact, in 2007, they only averaged 10 pass attempts and 95 passing yards per game, which were both the lowest in the FBS. In the 2004 Emerald Bowl, they had a single drive last 14 minutes and 26 seconds, a higher length of time than any other drive in NCAA or NFL history. This is a team that can kill the clock, not one that's supposed to play in 74-62 football games. The secret to how this happened lies in 2 terrible defenses. On the season, Navy allowed 36.4 points per game, good for 109th out of 120 teams in the FBS. North Texas was even worse, allowing 45.1 points per game, making them the worst scoring defense in all of the FBS. The 74 points that North Texas conceded to Navy wasn't even their worst defensive performance of the season. That came in their opener, when they fell to Oklahoma 79-10. After North Texas led 21-10 at the end of the first quarter, a historic second quarter saw Navy outscore the Mean Green 35-28. That combined 63 points is the most points scored in a quarter in FBS history, and the halftime score of North Texas 49, Navy 45, 94 total points, is still the most points scored in a half in FBS history. The midshipmen piled on another 3 touchdowns in the third quarter, leading 65-56 with just 1 quarter to go, and they closed out the victory 74-62. Navy completed just 4 of their 6 passing attempts for 108 yards and a touchdown. Meanwhile, North Texas quarterback Giovanni Vizza completed 40 of 50 passes for 478 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. However, Navy was able to make up that difference on the ground, setting a school record with 572 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. It was the 4th record-setting offensive game in less than a month, but college football wasn't done yet. In fact, it had saved the best for last. On November 24th, 2007, Chadron State played Abilene Christian in the second round of the Division II playoffs in a game to be remembered. Let's pick things up at the start of the fourth quarter. Abilene Christian is up 49-20, and Chadron State has only scored 6 points in the last 2 quarters. They look practically dead in the water, having thrown interceptions on their previous 2 drives. But all of a sudden, a switch is flipped. Chadron State scores a touchdown in 44 seconds. Then they almost immediately intercept Abilene Christian, and 26 seconds later are in the end zone again. It's 49-34. Abilene Christian extends the lead with a touchdown on their next drive, 56-34, but Chadron State is not deterred. They score a touchdown. They do miss the 2-point conversion, but get the ball back and score another touchdown. After another missed 2-point conversion, it's 56-46. They force a 3-and-out and go down and kick a field goal. Then they force another 3-and-out, getting the ball ultimately at their own 8-yard line with 1 minute and 29 seconds left and trailing by 7. With 11 seconds to go, they score their 5th touchdown of the quarter and tie the game at 56. Ladies and gentlemen, we are headed to overtime. In the first overtime, Abilene Christian scores a touchdown, and Chadron State follows. The second overtime is played just like the first. But then, in the third overtime, Abilene Christian has to settle for a field goal. It takes Chadron State just 2 plays to march into the end zone, doing the unthinkable. After trailing 49-20 in the fourth quarter, Chadron State has won 76-73 in 3 overtimes. The game combines for 149 total points, a new record for all divisions of the NCAA. That final score, 76-73, is the first time Chadron State led all day. Starting at the beginning of the fourth quarter, here's Chadron State's final 9 drives. Touchdown, 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 field goal, touchdown, and now in overtime, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. It's simply unthinkable. The teams combined for 1,369 combined yards of offense, and a lot of that is due to the running backs on both teams. Despite this being a Division II game, both teams' starting running backs become NFL players. Chadron State's starting running back is Danny Woodhead. For Abilene Christian, it's Bernard Scott. These guys were insane in college. Danny Woodhead holds the Division II career rushing record and set a new D2 record with 38 total touchdowns in 2006. Then in 2007, Bernard Scott broke that record with 39 total touchdowns in 13 games, although those touchdowns have officially been vacated along with all 10 of Abilene Christian's wins from that season due to NCAA violations. In their 76-73 duel, Danny Woodhead finished with 237 total yards and 4 touchdowns, while Scott had an incredible 383 total yards and 6 touchdowns. But despite Scott's performance, Abilene Christian did end up blowing that 29-point lead, eliminating them from the D2 playoffs. However, in 2008, they returned to the playoffs with a vengeance, and in another second-round matchup, this time against West Texas A&M, Abilene Christian won, and get ready for this, 93-68 for a combined 161 points. This is the current record holder for all divisions for the most total points scored in an NCAA game. Bernard Scott had 353 total yards and 7 touchdowns in the win. Abilene Christian scored touchdowns on 13 of their 15 drives, along with a missed field goal and a punt. Both teams scored at least 14 points in every quarter. There were 24 scoring drives in the 60-minute game, and West Texas A&M wide receiver Charlie Martin had 14 receptions for 325 yards and 5 touchdowns in what was ultimately a 25-point loss. But as we return to 2007 to wrap things up, within a span of 6 weeks, we had 5 games set new records for scoring across the FBS, FCS, D2, and D3, with the team that lost the highest scoring game of all returning with a vengeance the following season to set a new record and the current record for the most total points scored in an NCAA football game. That stretch in 2007 is remarkable, unbelievable, and slept on. I've been Connor Grohl. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again real soon.